So we were very excited about the experts because the trailer, for the first time in a very long time, the trailer was cut incredibly well. Malaysian movies have the worst trailers. A lot of the time, they feel like they've been edited by people who've never seen a movie trailer. And the experts was different. It was snappy, it was cool, it was cut in sync with music. And if all of this sounds generic and how trailers usually are, it's sad that it's never the case with the Malaysian films. And so we saw the trailer for the experts and we were like, oh, this looks cool. This looks fun. Also, we don't get Malaysian heist movies. So to watch a Malaysian heist movie was also something exciting. Now, The Experts isn't a bad film, but it doesn't quite deliver on that promise, right?
My biggest disappointment is that it is an episode of the old TV show Leverage that's run too long.
Great TV show, by the way.
Great TV show. The original was a lot of fun. And I think fun is a very good word because movies like this need to be fun. They may be serious, like what is that Spike Lee one?
Inside Man.
Inside Man was, as serious as it is, as heavy as it was still a lot of fun. Gone in 60 Seconds is a great fun heist movie.
The Oceans movies.
Oceans films are like the bar that everybody needs to clear right now. But
The Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh, Thomas Crown Affair was also a lot of fun. And I think the problem was this movie couldn't decide if it wanted to be fun or if it wanted to be serious because there are real jarring tonal shifts throughout this thing. There are characters who feel like they're in a different movie altogether and just story beats that feel unnecessarily amped up for fun.
My problem with all of these big blockbuster action type films that we put out into the world, and when I say we, I mean Malaysia, is that a lot of times they try to be everything movies, right? Because the general idea is that the Malay audience expects a certain thing and therefore you have to give it to them. That means you have to have the dose of drama Melayu, you have to have the silly slapstick comedy, and somehow try to shoehorn some cool idea you have into all of that. Like this thing is produced by Joel So, who's also one of the writers. Joel, of course, is the producer and creator of the Police Evo series. And we know where his influences are. And you can tell by watching this movie, but also it feels sometimes that his hands are tied because he has to shoehorn all of this other stuff into it because that's what the Malay audience demands. I don't know how true that is because this same Malay audience consumes a lot of K-drama and Hollywood drama, which is of the same ilk.
Yeah.
And they seem to enjoy it without all of those extraneous elements. But let's get the good stuff out of the way. I think this is a very well-produced movie. I think the opening credits are really cool and smart. I think it looks good. Some of the performances are a little wanting. I think Aaron Aziz was a lot better in Sheriff, for example. He's a little too broody in this one. He really doesn't get to stretch his wings and do anything cool. But for the most part, the movie is okay. I just think it lacks cool. It lacks sexiness. Its story is so convoluted that it doesn't quite deliver on the promise that convoluted stories should do.
I think my biggest issue with this one is that in its convoluted nature, it feels as if they've included these bits, these flashbacks, and these fancy storytelling exercises just so they could include a fancy storytelling exercise, as opposed to it being a natural way that this story would unfurl.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think the biggest problem with that is this method of creating tension and suspense by withholding information from the audience. And so in this one, there is a bit of a family drama that's going on between Shafiq Kyle and Aaron Aziz's characters. They're both brothers, and there's this thing with their dad. And of course, the reveal of that is this snail-like trickle of information that is told through some of the most labored flashbacks, where every flashback reveals one tiny piece of information. And the problem with that is every time they kind of cut to one of those flashbacks, it brings this film to a screeching halt. Just as you're getting into it and there's something cool happening or something funny happening, suddenly it is this overwrought flashback that doesn't really tell you anything, mind you. And it's the same flashback that is used to reveal different elements of information. But after a while, you get frustrated because they're just trying to create a false sense of suspense by withholding all this information throughout the film. And when I talk about convoluted stories requiring a payoff, it's got to mean something, or it's got to be fun, or it's got to be exciting, or it's got to be worthwhile at the end. And by the time you get to the big reveal, you're kind of bored and tired, and you're like, oh, that's it? That feels incredibly drama Malayu.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point there was a flashback within a flashback.
I think there was.
Wasn't there?
I know they kind of use some weird color grading to kind of indicate when it's a flashback, but it does get a little confusing, especially since you have no idea what is happening with Shafiq Kyle's hair.
Yeah.
Like the beginning of the movie takes place 10 years in the past, and Shafiq Kyle's character ends up in prison, and you're not sure why. But in the flashbacks, he has really long hair. But the bit we see, the heist we see, the beginning of the film has him bald. So we're led to believe that his long hair kind of grew out at some point between the heist at the beginning, the flashback, and before he went to prison.
But Aaron Aziz still looks the same.
Exactly. And Shafiq Kyle looks so different that you're actually confused as to the timeline. It would have been much simpler for them to just go 1 year later after the heist, and that would have made so much more sense.
The biggest fault in this film is that it feels like the filmmakers, the storytellers, were trying to overcomplicate it so that it's not a straightforward heist movie. They could have gone with just a straightforward thing where they have to steal a thing from these gangsters without having the family drama, without having this baggage of that first heist and then the time jumps and then having to depend on the flashback to go back and explain things and show relationships and how relationships began or failed, or what. It's just too many things.
Oh, it's far too many things. And you're right, the overcomplicating of the story didn't help. Ocean's 11 feels like an incredibly complex story, but then when you break it down, it's actually quite straightforward. And that's why it works, because by the time the reveal happens, you're already on board and you understand exactly what is going on. In this one, it almost feels like that overcomplication was at the expense of so many characters. And then what happens is every time they come face to face, they don't really have any proper conversation about what's going on. It feels like I'm the tense older brother, but I can't open up to you and have a conversation. So we're just going to murmur things at one another and then walk away because, there's trouble and we can't confront it. And it's just the worst elements of conflict writing. Because you're screaming at the screen, just talk it out and get it over with.
Not in a frustrated, designed audience sort of way. You know what I mean? It just feels like you, the audience, are screaming that because you just want it so that the story can move the fuck along.
Yes, exactly. And then because of that, it sacrifices Remy Ishak and Mimi Lana.
Also, I didn't like the Remy Ishak character. I didn't feel he needed to be flamboyant.
The flamboyance needs a purpose.
Yes.
And the purpose should be beyond just doing a dance with one of the characters as a distraction and getting fingerprints. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be part of the character as opposed to a plot point. And I think that's what was missing.
And it feels like the flamboyance of Remy Ishak's character was only so that they could get to that point later. It doesn't feel like a character. He feels like a caricature. He feels like a caricature of a guy who's seen too many Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean movies and has decided to make that his entire personality, which is already the worst types of people anyway.
The movie also couldn't seem to settle on a visual style. So you had moments when they were doing the Ocean's 11 split screen thing, but it didn't run throughout the entire movie. So it would happen, then it wouldn't, and then it would happen again, and then it wouldn't. And then you have the kind of CGI Army of Thieves safe cracking stuff, which appears for a little bit, but feels kind of out of step with the other stuff. And then you have Shafiq Kyle in his mind palace as he is unlocking a safe, which looked kind of cool on screen and was visually inventive, but yet again, tonally out of step with the rest of the movie because it was just maybe a cool scene that they thought up. So, in that sense, the movie kind of goes through all of these different visual styles, which feel a little inconsistent.
It feels like they had all these ideas of things to do and they just did them all without any real editorial process to ensure that there is some level of personality within the film, right? You cannot have your film constantly changing gears like that. I mean, you can do one gear shift and that's fine, but even then there has to be a reason for that gear shift. I think the problem here is that Remy Isha and Mimi Lana's characters both feel like they're in a funner movie that Shafiq Kyle and Aaron Aziz are not in. Because Shafiq Kyle and Aaron Aziz are very serious. They're really playing that internal turmoil, quiet Melayu, strong guy type. But then Remy Isha and Mimi Lana are just having fun. And then suddenly you've got Douglas Lim as a
Chinese gangster tailor.
And then Tony Yusuf's villain character is super heavy serious, but Maya Karin's super serious character constantly finds herself in not serious moments. It just feels like too many. Yeah.
Yeah, Maya Karen's character, who is supposed to be the serious right-hand woman, often finds herself in one too many slapstick moments, which kind of undermines her seriousness as well.
It's the Abigail character from the third Oceans.
Yes.
Basically, she was playing Pacino's right-hand woman, right?
Yes.
So she is the straight character, and then she finds herself in these really weird positions. However, that's written for it. It's a fun movie with serious characters leaning into the fun. Whereas here, the movie can't decide if it wants to be a fun movie or a serious movie. And I think that was the problem. You have all these moments, and then you also have actual physical fights and gun battles and people dying on camera, and you go like, whoa, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this.
And then there is the whole heist of it all, which doesn't feel as cool as it should be. I think it builds up a lot more than what was actually delivered on screen. It feels like, what was the all-female Oceans reboot called? Ocean's 8? Ocean's 7?
Yeah.
Ocean's 8.
8.
Ocean's 8. It feels a lot like Ocean's 8, where they were trying to recreate the surprise of Ocean's 11, but it felt a little too convoluted and kind of fizzled out by the time you got to the big reveal. And this one has a moment of tension because there is a fingerprint issue and Shafiq Kyle's character can't get into the vault. But of course, the whole process itself isn't actually a clever execution of heist tropes. It's just someone's coming down the hallway. How fast can you turn this lock? And I think all of that kind of falls short for me. Even the fake out towards the end with what happens to the crew, it's something you see coming from a mile away.
Even that bit of Shafiq Kyle's character trying to unlock the safe and the villain is sort of walking down the hallway, as you say. It's supposed to be a ticking time clock thing, and that's fine. However, there needs to be a design as to how Shafiq Kyle's character gets out of it. You cannot just magic it out that he's changed costume.
He's changed costumes, but there's also a security guard that's been knocked out. I don't know where he hid the body. And I think that matters because obviously in a heist flick, all of these small elements matter so that you don't have to suspend too much disbelief because everything is based around the idea of tricking you, the audience, as well as tricking the people they're robbing from.
A heist movie is a magic trick. There has to be logical ways of something to happen that you then need to break. How did the card get from my right pocket to my left hand? How did your glasses come off your face onto my back pocket without you knowing? You cannot just wave it away and say, oh, it's just the magic of storytelling, because then as an audience, I'm like, well, all of this is crap because I don't see a way out of it.
I feel like everyone who decides to write a heist movie, and there are hundreds of heist movies, And sure, you can watch them and study them and research them. But I think what you really need to do is watch the Rick and Morty episode. Because
Oh,
someone has already done that for you. I think One
yeah,
Crew Over the Cuckoo's Morty
yeah.
is a season 4 episode that is absolutely brilliant. It breaks down the heist film in this meta way that actually explains what it's all about, uses its tropes in creating a heist episode in itself, and it's one of the cleverest executions of the heist genre. But it also gives you an understanding of why stuff works, what doesn't, and what you have to do to make it successful. And like you said, Bahir, it's all about misdirection. It's a magic trick, it's misdirection, it's creating stuff that doesn't break that illusion. And I think there were too many things within the heist of the experts that broke that illusion. There were too many things that were just Deus Ex Machina flashbacks. Oh, look, actually, he said something else after the flashback cut away, but you missed that, but we're showing it to you 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
And that's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, because it really feels like you're cheating me. It feels like you're cheating the storytelling form, right? You're cutting away when you shouldn't. Even when you're telling a person a story, if it's something that's not important, it's not important. I'm keeping it from you because it's not important. I'm not omitting it because I want to tell it to you later when something else happens. It doesn't work that way. So when your one flashback or the flashback to that one moment is cut up into 4 different places for 4 different people to tell, it doesn't work, because then the question is, how do you know what that person's point of view is?
The Experts isn't a terrible film. It's actually a pretty decent film. I just feel it's kind of disappointing for what it set out to do. There are really bad Malaysian movies, but this one actually does well. It's produced well, it's shot well, it looks kind of cool at moments, but it feels like it is let down by too much story, too much narrative, too much plot. It's trying
Hmm.
to do too much, and in doing so, it doesn't execute those elements as well as it does, and because of that, we felt shortchanged. And we're also coming to it from a place of high expectation because of the people involved behind the scenes. And we're used to them making some pretty good stuff. And so we came into this hoping that it would be something quite exciting. Also, because we don't get Malaysian heist movies. And I would love to see Malaysian heist movies.
Yeah.
That said, there is one thing that did surprise me about this movie, Bahir.
Okay.
At the end of the movie, there is no title card. The bad guys get away with it.
Yeah.
How come LPF didn't insist that they put a title card saying that the crew was caught by the police a week later? Because we've seen it in many, many movies.
I know what you're saying. However,
Because the bad guys are not allowed to win according to our LPF regulations, right?
my only thing about that is that that could have been an old thing. It was never official, I don't believe. Even then, it doesn't feel like something that anybody's touched since. Maybe Joel was able to negotiate his way out of it because he wants to make a second one.
Well done, Joel.
Or maybe it's a thing about how the villains in this movie are worse bad guys than they are. I will say though, I do love the fact that everybody in this film is a crook of some kind. And they're all fucking smoking all the fucking time.
Yes, they're smoking actual cigarettes. I do love that.
Yeah, which I found really hilarious because these guys are crooks.
Everyone is some kind of criminal. We don't see any police at all. They're all operating in some KL Underground or a rebranded Sheraton Hotel, which is great.
Yeah, true, correct.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that. I was a big fan of everyone smoking, actually, because I haven't seen that on screen in a long time.
I just love what it implies. In Malaysia, it's a coded image where a guy is smoking, he's a crook. But I love the fact that Joel was able to make his heroes, who are, yes, crooks, but are smoking, which I find really amusing and quite fun to watch.
We do recommend that you go watch The Experts. We think you should. It's not one of those shitty Malaysian movies that we would tell you not to give your money to.
The Experts isn't a waste of time.
Oh, not at all.
As a fan of cinema, as a fan of Malaysian cinema, I think The Experts is a clear example of accomplished writers, producers, and filmmakers trying to do something new. And I will go so far as to say it falls short in its execution because they're trying to do too much.
And also, we always celebrate when filmmakers take risks. And The Experts is a risk because we don't get these kind of movies here. I think it's something to be celebrated when people do these things, whether they succeed or not. And I think it's worth your time as well to watch because it is a good effort that fell short of our expectations. Go check out The Experts. It's now showing in Malaysian cinemas. Let us know what you think once you've seen it. Goggler MY, all of our social media feeds. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.